Hello. Hi. Good evening, everyone. So, we're going to be starting now. Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to you all to this book launch of Raw Material by Arpit Gupta. Agarwal, sorry, that's my name. Gupta is my name. I'm Ishita Gupta from Subtext Literary Agency, and along with Paper Towns Publishers, we are delighted to host you today. Can I please request everyone to put their phones on silent? And I think I'll begin the evening by calling Mr. Manik Jaiswal, who is the co-founder at Paper Towns, to say a few words about the book. A round of applause for Manik, please.
Thank you, Ishita, and good evening, everyone. On behalf of Paper Towns Publishers, I extend a heartfelt welcome to all of you. We have great evenings ahead with insightful discussions and, of course, an engaging conversation with Arpit Agarwal and his brilliant debut novel. See, at Paper Towns, we have always been on the lookout for interesting and captivating stories. So last year, when we had a little conversation with Arpit and I got to know about his script, I was definitely intrigued, but at the same time, a little cautious because of the intense and research-based work in the book. Because we do understand writing a compelling spy thriller requires an understanding of global politics, current affairs, and intelligence dynamics, as well as the ability to craft a gripping narrative because you have to blend fiction in a way that it makes sense, keeping intact the research part and also not sounding very academics. It's a tough combination to get it right, and I'm sure, and I believe Arpit has done a wonderful job with this book. But once I had read it, we knew we had something special. The book had all the elements of a world-class thriller, and of course, like I mentioned, deep geopolitical insight, masterful storytelling, and undeniable cinematic quality. As you flip through the pages, you would find yourself immersed in the book, picturing yourself in the setup. As we learned more about Arpit's background, we understood, the way book was written, we understood his experience and interest in news, entertainment, and international media. It all made sense. His knowledge and storytelling instincts shine through every page. We are incredibly proud and very happy to publish Raw Material, and we are excited what lies ahead, and we believe this book to become a next sensation very soon. Thank you so much. Now to officially launch the book, may I invite Arpit to the stage?
Okay, thank you so much for your warm applause. Uh, so if you decide to take any pictures and post them on social media, please use the hashtag raw material. Now on to talking about the book itself. May I please invite Mr. Arun Thapar onto the stage. He's a veteran media professional and executive producer who has been producing and creating content for over 3 decades. And Arpit, of course. And I'd like to call Arpit to join us on the stage as well.
Hello. Sorry, at age 52, I feel like a medievalist as well. Thanks very much for being here, everybody. And it's lovely to see an absolutely full house. And we're here to celebrate this man who most of us in this room know for at least 30 years, and his new avatar, that of a freshly minted author. Congratulations, Arpit. Well done. Very proud of you. So seeing this is quite interesting, you know, this massive backdrop. I was just carrying this with me. So I've had it for a while. So that's one of the many iterations that the book has gone through. And it's quite interesting that Arpit moved to Delhi from Mumbai a few years ago. And I was a bit miffed with him because he went quite AWOL for about a year and a half. And then one fine day I get a phone call saying, Arun, listen, I have a favor to ask. And I said, sure. Where have you been all this while? And he said, well, I've just dropped you an email. I've written a book. So this is one of the advanced editions, the manuscript, and I'd like you to have a read at it. And I was completely blown away. I said, wow, you've been doing this for a year and a half? No wonder you were so quiet and unavailable. And I opened my email and I saw there wasn't just a book, it was a pretty sensational, spy thriller that traverses geographies and history and geopolitics and, over this large sort of period of history over 70 years, and in a place like Tibet, which, frankly speaking, many of us, tend to forget about. And so hats off, Arpit, and before we dive into this, let me ask you in the eternal words of Indian television journalism, aapko kaisa lag raha hai?
I think,
You can breathe, that's all right.
yeah, just very happy, yes, very nervous as well. And I think the overriding emotion is just relieved that it's done. And today is the first and last time that I'm meeting so many people and I'm going to be on a stage. I think that's that's is it. Sorry? I'm out of my depth here. I'm very happy behind the scene. This really scares me.
Okay, right. So, Arpit, a lot of us, some of us have read the book, but a lot of us have not, including Professor Wahid. Why don't you tell us what the book is about? A brief summary without giving away too much.
Okay. So, Raw Material at its core is a fast-paced thriller, but it's not your usual, gangs and guns and car chases. It's a bit different, but it does have an element of that. Quite a bit of it, actually. So Raw Material, as you must have gathered by now, it's built on real-life history, real-life events such as the Tibetan uprising, the flight of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to India, and the COVID-19 pandemic. And it takes these events and it merges them into one cohesive story. The story tracks 3 different plot lines. The first is of Wei. That's Wei, actually. He's the villain of the piece. He's dark, he's sinister, he's just bad. The second is of Pema. Pema is this young Tibetan guerrilla fighter. She's not on the poster. And she's also Wei's mother. Her story merges with the third plot line, which is of Vijay. Vijay is also Pema's son, but from another union. Vijay is a young, well, not young, is an unassuming Indian police officer. And he finds himself ensnared in this plot hatched by Wei from across the Himalayas. And the story is about how he discovers the plot, how he manages to get out of it. And I tell this story exploring different themes, such as in the case of Wei, we explore unmatched ambition, greed, universal theme of chasing money and power.
Right.
In the case of Pema, we explore forced adulthood, betrayal, bit of love, abandonment. And we also, in the story, explore the role of media. A lot of my media friends are here, and the entire contingent there. So we explore a bit of the changing landscape of media worldwide and how it's increasingly open to manipulation. And lastly, the story explores a what-if scenario of how the pandemic began. And from what I'm reading about what the investigative agencies are discovering across the world, my story may not be that far from the truth. So that, in a nutshell, is what the story is about.
Fantastic. Why Tibet? You know, it's a pretty remote part of the world. It's also behind an iron curtain of its own. There's not much that emerges from Lhasa and Tibet because information is controlled. It's a tough subject to go into, and let alone to write a very expansive book about. So why Tibet, considering you've grown up in South India and in North India, and whether you're Gupta or an Agarwal, of course, we can settle later. But your influences have largely been Hindi heartland. Why all the way to Tibet?
So interestingly, though I did grow up in Pondicherry in an ashram, I always had Tibetan classmates. So what I found later is that the ashram where I grew up, it had an opening for the Tibetan cause, and the mother of the ashram, she had told the Tibetan delegation at that time in the 1950s that our institution is always open to you. So they had a refugee camp in Pondicherry, and at any given point of time, the ashram has always had a couple of students from that camp into the ashram. So I always had this, bunch of Tibetan friends. So in a sense, I grew up with Tibet, and it just always fascinated me. Later on, when I started reading, my first, I think, introduction to Tibet was through Tintin in Tibet.
Right.
I've always been a huge Tintin fan, as you probably know. And Tibet has just been this place of, it's remote, it's inaccessible, there's a sense of adventure around it. And of course, the lure of, these meditative people up there practicing Buddhism, it just fascinated me. So when I decided to write, it was, I think, just natural that it came. It had to be in my book.
Are you likely to get a visa after this book?
That's a good one. I hope so. I don't know.
Okay, so there's a lot of history, a lot of geopolitics. It traverses a wide expanse of time, almost 70 years, if I recollect. I think 2018 is where it ends largely, and goes back all the way to partition and stuff like that. What part of it is historical, and how do you, as a writer, sort of intertwine the history with the fiction and then make it credible?
So the first chapter is set in 2018, but actually that's a time jump.
Right.
Because from the second chapter onwards, it's then linear. So the second chapter, I think, is 1946, and then it, just progresses non-stop. And at some point in the book, you will realize that, I've read the first chapter, which is actually supposed to come here. So I've just, in a sense, written the entire book.
So fractured timeline.
Yeah, I've just picked up one chapter and I put it in the beginning because it had a lot of action in it.
Right.
The previous part, before the present times of 2018, 19, 20, is just the backstory. It's setting up the characters, who they were, what is it that has made them into what they are. And through that process, I get to speak about the history of Tibet, what they went through, what is the Tibetan uprising all about?
Right.
Why did the Dalai Lama have to leave the Potala and come to India?
Right. So I can clearly see the elements of a visual storyteller here. All your experiences, as a content creator, running media companies, television media companies, Balaji, and then, Miditech, and of course Keshet. That was a strong influence, I think. Keshet is the Israeli company that owns rights to Homeland, for example. Are you thinking of turning this into a series, into a movie, or let me be blunt, did you write it as one?
Well, because, you and I, we were born into television. We've only done television. So television is in the book. There's no two ways about it. Anyone who's read the book so far, they've all come back to me with the same feedback, that it's cinematic, it's very visual, it's very descriptive. I don't know how to write any other way. It's my first book. Will it become a series or something? I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah, well, it certainly reads like a screenplay. So, so that's very much there. Checks on the mail, I hope. So, yeah. So, yeah, characters. Firstly, you're an Amitabh Bachchan fan, clearly, which is why Vijay, So there's clearly a Vijay. I don't know whether he's Gupta or Saxena or Srinivastav, but he's definitely Vijay. Is that the reason why Vijay? Because in the year 2018, to think of a name like Vijay is a bit retro. Was that deliberate?
It was deliberate in the sense that, it's a well-established name. Vijay stands, exactly for the reason you gave. Amitabh Bachchan through the 70s, every character was Vijay. And I just love what that name stands for. The characters keep changing through all those movies, but what Vijay symbolizes remains the same. And our Vijay in the story is exactly that. He's honest, he is a simple man, a middle-class, hard-working person who's come up the ranks. That's who Vijay is.
Is he possibly the next Jack Ryan? Is he the Indian Jack Ryan? Clearly, there's a lot of Tom Clancy here. I can see influences there.
Well, why not? Fingers crossed.
Right. So speaking of influences, who are your...
Put me in touch with people. You're in the industry.
So, speaking of influences, who are your literary influences or movies or series? Where did it all come from? You suddenly made a transition from being a TV man, a media guy, in the business of crafting images and stories, and suddenly you write this pretty intense book. How did you do that and why?
Well, in terms of influences, I've always been fascinated by spy thrillers. I think the first one I read was, The Day of the Jackal.
Forsyth.
Followed by Odessa File. That's Frederick Forsyth.
Frederick Forsyth, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then, I read Ludlum, the Bond series. These have been early influences. But I think it would be fair to say that what has really influenced me is OTT, the series. And especially when I started working in distributing some of these Israeli series in India and South Asia.
Yeah.
At that time, my job required me to not just watch, take notes about, these spy thrillers like
For format
Homeland,
adaptations, yeah.
format adaptation, how it can be reimagined for a particular area, but also get into the mind of the writer. What is the history behind it? Why did the writer write this? Is it based on something that actually happened? So on and so forth. Where else has this traveled? How was it received there? So I think for the last almost 10 years, spy thrillers have been really, bouncing around in my head. So it had to come out somewhere.
So I think that's a good segue. Would you like to read us a passage? I've requested Arpit to read us a couple of passages through the course of this chat, and why don't you begin with the first one you've shortlisted?
So I've spoken about Wei. Let me read a bit about who Wei is. Wei is our villain. So this is a short little thing that I've written on who Wei really is. This is in the chapter called Malafide. Wei Danming was a force to be reckoned with. He had his mother's courage and tenacity, but it was his father's ruthlessness that truly set him apart. With a chiseled face and sharp features, Wei cut an imposing figure, but make no mistake, he was not a man to be trifled with. There was a seriousness that hung about Wei like a cloak. He was not one to waste time on small talk or idle chatter. His friends, if you could call them that, often said that he appeared as if he were always plotting something in the back of his mind. But this was simply the way he operated. Everything about Wei was long-term and strategic. from how he moved in the shadows to how he played chess. And oh, how he played chess. Wei was a master of the game, always thinking several steps ahead of his opponents. His mind was a labyrinth of tactics and plans, each move calculated to perfection. Many had dared to cross his path, but none had emerged victorious.
Great. So you've invested a lot in Wei, the character. Were there any characters that you especially enjoyed writing about, and were there some that were really hard to bring to life? And a few folks are being naughty with their phones. Could you please put them off?
So Wei actually gets the maximum screen time, even though he's the villain in the book. And he was the most fun to write, definitely, because I had to explore his depth of darkness. And that's not easy, because the man, there's nothing redeeming about him. He's just dark. He only thinks ill, and how he can trample over others and get his way. And that was a bit difficult to write, but it was fun. I can't say he's my favorite character, but it was the toughest character to nail.
So what darkness within yourself did you have to tap into?
I think there's a bit of Wei in all of us. Best kept under control.
You're not talking about the protein, clearly. I'm sorry if I put you on the spot here, but clearly the mother-son relationship is quite central to the book. Obviously, there are two sets of sons. Do you draw upon your own relationship with your own mother because there are elements of the autobiography in every book, isn't there? So what were those emotions and those elements of that relationship that you drew upon?
So I've realized that when I wrote about Pema, there was a lot of my mother in her. I did not realize it at that time, but when I look back, then I can see there's a lot of my mom's characteristics in Pema. So she's tenacious, Pema. My mother was mad tenacious. Pema is a fighter, and she decides to abandon her entire past for what she believed in. So I explore finding purpose through Pema. And so that I think was, if I can call it autobiographical. It has definitely strong elements of my mother in it.
And what about the son part of it?
You're asking if I identify with Wei or Vijay?
With either, yeah. Or with elements of their characters.
Probably Vijay. There's a bit of me in Vijay. He's fond of Tintin as well.
Right.
So there's that.
He's also fond of his wife.
There is that too. Yes.
Right.
Remind me never to call a friend for this.
Get in line. So, it's a long, hard process writing a book. I mean, I said this at the opening. You disappeared pretty much for a long time. Is it a lonely process to write a book? Do you sort of escape or sort of retreat into this imaginarium of your own to the exclusion of all external company and influences, or do you shut yourself out? How does it work? What's the process?
Yeah, pretty much that. I really, to be honest, I didn't know what I'm getting into. I just knew that I wanted to do it. And it just seemed enticing and appealing. And when I started writing, I realized how little I knew about writing. I knew I had a story in my mind. I just didn't understand the process. So I enrolled myself for a couple of courses online. And to be honest, they gave me more anxiety than clarity, because they just made me feel ridiculously inadequate, that I'm not geared to write. But I had this need, I need to do this thing. So I realized that the only way to do it is to just shut yourself from the world and give yourself a target of a number of words per day. and I tried to follow that. It took me, I think, about a year to do this. I did not know I could do this. So it was hugely, it came as a shock to me that I could do it. You know, just lock myself in, not meet people, just step out when I needed to step out. And yeah.
And how did the family deal with that? You dedicated the book to your daughter Antara, of course. But how did the family deal with this new avatar of yours?
I think they're still coming to terms with it. They've been very supportive. Antara, of course, has had numerous sessions with me. Some of the plot twists have actually come from her. No, why don't you do it this way? And she always brought up her generation's perspective. No, my generation likes it this way. This is not going to work. So I'm very thankful for that.
Right. Is there another piece you'd like us to read? Would you like to read another piece for us?
Sure. Yeah. Let me read about
Sorry.
Pema. Okay. So this is from the chapter 1959. So when I read about Wei, it was describing who Wei is. This piece doesn't describe Pema, but it tells you what she's going through.
Could you tell us a little bit about the character first?
Pema is this young Tibetan guerrilla fighter. She's born into riches. And I don't want to give the story away, but for all kinds of reasons, she has to leave her house. And she disappears into the forest, and she trains with the Khampa guerrillas, which were dedicated to freeing Tibet from the Chinese control at that time. And she is actually called upon to assist with the security arrangements for His Holiness when he was coming to India in March 1950. So this little piece is what happens to her in that journey.
Right.
As Pema took aim with her pistol, her finger hovering over the trigger to deliver the final blow, a sudden ray of moonlight revealed Deng's face, just as he begged, "Don't shoot!" Pema stumbled back in shock and horror. She had not expected this. She had not expected Deng to be here. And now that she had him in her sights, she was unsure what to do next. Burning with rage and anger, Pema's first instinct was to pump a bullet into the man who had brought nothing but sorrow into her life. But in that very second, she also realized that if she killed him, her Norbu would have no one left to look after him. But she could not just let him go either. No, she had to find a way to make him suffer. Without a word, she fired a shot, purposely missing Deng's head only by inches. "This is for my Norbu," she said in a cold, quiet voice. Before Deng could react, she fired again, this time aiming for his kneecap. "And this is for you," she said, her voice filled with rage and vengeance. Deng let out a piercing scream as the bullet tore through his thigh, shattering bone and flesh. In that moment, he recognized who his adversary was and why she had spared his life. He looked up to curse her, but Pema had disappeared into the night.
So it's quite interesting that your chapters have Latin titles. Why is that?
My daughter studies Latin. And I was having a chat with her. And she came up with some names. And it just occurred to me that why not name all of them Latin? I think I had named one of them Malafide, which is the Latin word term I knew. And then it just made sense to name all of them from Latin phrases.
Right. What advice could you give people who seem to think they have a book in them, and there are lots of NDTV folks, and we're part of a WhatsApp group. It's a bit like a family of old fogies who keep sending each other greetings and happy birthdays and whatnot. And and a lot of them are turning to writing. They're not writing about the juicy stuff, but they are writing interesting things like your wonderful book. What's your advice?
Well, there's one thing that I learned. I think it was in one of those classes that I had enrolled for online, that when you start writing, don't edit what you wrote the previous day. Because if you do that, you will never write more. You will just keep on and on editing what you've done. And I took that advice very seriously, because each time I stopped to look at what I'd written the previous day, I just found mistakes and 10,000 ways to improve it. And I think someone had said in one of those courses that you can fix a badly written page, but you can't fix a blank page.
Right.
So
Fantastic.
just keep moving ahead. Don't stop. Later on, you can find someone like Ishita to edit it for you. You can also edit it yourself before you find someone like Ishita. And that is a smart thing to do, you know. But don't stop writing. Just get it out of your system. That is one thing that really helped me.
And for a book like this, for instance, there's a lot of research. It's very research heavy. And it's research about a part of the world where much information is not necessarily available, particularly pop culture. I mean, you know a lot about the CIA, MI6, Mossad, but very little is known about Chinese intelligence, the Second Bureau. How did you come upon all of this information, and even about, Tibet and their traditional fighters, the Khampas, for example? That's a lot of research in there. How did you go about that?
I think it would be fair to say that it was 2 parts research, 1 part writing.
Right.
For a book like this. A lot of research went into it, definitely. I met some people who worked in the intelligence services. They've shared some interesting insights with me, which I can't name them and I can't share that. But that helped, definitely. But today, a lot of it is available online, but you got to search for it. And you got to make sure that it's authentic.
But dark web.
But not necessarily the dark web, even the pretty lit up web. The information is there. But you just got to be sure that it's authentic.
Right.
And to be honest, when I started writing, I didn't know that such a thing as the Second Bureau existed. I didn't know that the Khampas existed. That just came out of the research.
Right, fantastic. Well, I think, it's been wonderful listening to you, Arpit, and I'd really love you to read another passage for us, and then we can perhaps close this session. And thanks for having me here, and thank you everyone for being here this evening. I hope you really, really enjoy the book, enjoy it as much as Arpit did writing it, although he was more nervous writing it, and I hope you won't be. But thanks very much for being here. Wonderful of all of you to come.
So this is Vijay, and this takes place in 2020. And it takes place at 10 p.m. at the Vigyan Bhavan on Maulana Azad Road. By the way, the book has a lot for people living in Delhi. The action sequences in the Vigyan Bhavan, at Delhi Heart, in the Tughlaqabad Fort. So if you are from these parts, which obviously you are, you'll enjoy that.
Permission की problem होएगी.
तेरे को
Show
होगी
बनाने
तो-
में.
Do not resist us, Vijay, Sadat commanded from across the room. You will have your chance in court. You can offer your explanation there. We know that you have been in league with the Chinese. Your own man, Aravindan, called it. Aravindan, Vijay retorted with fury. That is a lie. You know it, Sadat. You know me, damn it. He then turned to the Prime Minister, his desperation palpable. I implore you, sir, grant me just 10 minutes. I can clarify everything. But the Prime Minister's response was bitter and cutting. What will you explain to me? He glowered with disdain. That the hijacking was legitimate? That you never sought the Chinese help? Vijay attempted to interject, his voice strained. Sir, I came here today on my own accord. I requested this audience to inform you of this very conspiracy that I uncovered only hours ago. But the Prime Minister had heard enough. Take him away, he ordered, tersely turning around. Sadat nodded to one of his men and he stepped forward, his fingers curling around a pair of handcuffs as he snarled at Vijay to turn around. But at that moment, something inside Vijay snapped and his ordinary facade began to fade. He knew the importance of the moment and realized that he had only one opportunity to clear his name. His failure to act in this instance would cause the collapse of everything he had tirelessly built, his career, reputation, and very existence. Then, in a surge of sudden swiftness, before anyone could suspect or react, Vijay executed a lethal maneuver and disarmed the commando, taking away his gun and catching the unsuspecting soldier off guard. Then, with that gun, Vijay fired a calculated shot at the commando standing beside Sadat. The bullet hit the man's chest, but Vijay knew about the bulletproof vest he was wearing. Still, the impact sent the commando sprawling on the carpet. With both the commandos down and chaos reigning, Vijay aimed his gun at Sadat. Stop, Sadat. This is a big mistake.
Thank you, Arpit. Wonderful. Very visual. Any questions from the audience? We'd love to hear from you. Go on, Kishale. Is there a microphone?
We have a mic. We have a mic, right? Yeah.
This is to Arpit as well as to Professor White, which I've been thinking of asking. Tibet was the place of the great game. And, during colonial India, the British and other powers also would launch pandits and monks to Tibet. So Tibet was the spy area. I mean, all the real spies were in Tibet. Sarat Chandra Das and then Kinthup tracked Tibet. Was there any part of that spy phase of Tibet in your book? I mean, did that inform your book in any ways? And also to Professor White, if you could tell us that why was the great game being played in Tibet?
Okay, I'll just answer briefly. Yeah. No, that I have not touched on that part of Tibetan history at all.
Okay. I mean, the Tibetan, why was the great game being played is basically something that started perhaps as early as the 13th century, but then sort of intensified during the 18th century, mid 17th to late 18th century. And that was when Russia, Peter the Great, in the 17th century, looked and saw this vast continent before him, and said, well, might as well go there because the Europeans were eating at his heels, during that time. And on the other hand, the Chinese, at that time, as the Qing Empire, were also expanding and came to Xinjiang and, in fact, to Tibet as well. So then the great game that you speak of is a late 19th century sort of phenomenon, or mid-19th century phenomenon, when the British sort of looked and saw that the Russians had expanded into Central Asia, which is Samarkand, Bukhara, and that Transoxiana, that area. And so surmised that they were under, they were under the impression that the Russians were coming for India. And in fact, what had happened is that Napoleon had written a letter to Tsar Alexander in the late 17th, early 18th century, 19th century, and said, listen, I'm coming to see you in Moscow, Napoleon, and together we'll go to India to conquer. And that fell into British India hands. And so ever since then, the Russians were always coming. And there was this movie or something, I think, called The Russians Are Coming. Nobody looked at a map, of course, to see how they would bring an army, an entire army. So that's how Tibet figures, actually.
Kishore, out of course question mat pucho. Anybody else, please? Arjun.
Uh-oh.
In course. Professor Wahid, actually, first to you. The Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama turns 90 this year. Is there you mentioned that there is this, after his statement in 1988, there was a change in attitudes between the hardliners. Some of them, there was a split in Tibetan society, so to say, what are the thing. Now, has it come to a point where the Dalai Lama himself has, in a way, said that his reincarnation will take place outside Tibet? And also, has it turned into a situation where the Dalai Lama has been the symbol of Tibet overall? But is it changing to some extent now that he's no longer there? And is there a, so to say, to use not the best word, but a secular leadership coming up in Tibet, which will lead the next generation?
In Tibet, you say?
In Tibet.
Okay, I don't think there's anything like a secular leadership in Tibet. There are many Tibetans who have sort of crossed the Rubicon, so to speak, and gone there. But you cannot talk about that as some sort of a movement within Tibet that would be secular. And I say this after at least 6 visits to Tibet, just wandering around, trying to be inconspicuous. And the feelings for the Dalai Lama are extremely intense. And in fact, when there was talk going on there was talk about maybe His Holiness going to China to negotiate. At that time, I remember a farmer that I met in central Tibet, and he said, please tell His Holiness not to come, because there will be danger. So I think that is the thing. I don't think that His Holiness engages in that debate between the hardliner, as you call them, and I don't know whether the opposite would be softliner or whatever, a slightly more realistic approach to what could happen. But yes, that divide does exist in thing. It's intensified because we know that the Dalai Lama is not going to be with us forever. But at the moment, within the Tibetan community, not considered too polite to talk about his going away, sort of at this point. So there's a bit of I wouldn't say tension, but awkwardness about it, because people don't want to talk about it. At any rate, His Holiness has said, I'm going to be there around until 113 or something like that. So, I think so those are the things that pertain to, the kind of situation.
Thank you.
Anyone else, please? Questions? Antara, do you want to ask your dad anything?
I'm good, thank you.
Anyone? Right, thank you very much. Thank you, and great having you here, Arpit, talk about your wonderful book. And congratulations once again, and wish you and the book every success. Good luck.
So, thank you, Arun and Arpit. That was a really fun and interesting conversation. Thank you, Professor Wahid. Thank you, Manik and Arpita, for being here and engaging us in conversation. And thank you to the audience for being here and being so engaged. Lastly, on behalf of all of us, thank you to Juhi for helping organize this event so well and so precisely. Please join us for refreshments outside, and I think most of you have already bought a copy of the book. Go buy one more, gift it to people, get it signed by Arpit. And thank you again for coming this evening.
Get it signed some other day. I'll take care of it. मेरी टीम की जाती है
You should sit somewhere up. Sit like this. Up is right to right. I need to go jump into it. I heard the bits and I was like, have you enjoyed it? Loved it. Yeah? I loved it. Don't wait. कभी नहीं. Traitor. Arpit, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
जब मिलेंगे तब करा लेंगे.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.